Hi again, everyone. I'm Ollie Matthews. This is Societal Narcissism. This video is sponsored by contribution from Elijah, and here's his story. Good afternoon, Ollie. I have another boomer-oriented story for you here out of New Hampshire. I think it demonstrates the impact boomer degeneracy, as you call it, costs generations of people money, and in addition to loss of opportunity and potential. In New Hampshire, the Youth Detention Center staff was found to have been sexually abusing kids as far back as probably the 80s, and it is now costing the small state about 1 million people several hundred million in taxpayer money. The victims rightfully deserve compensation, but a handful of boomers are ruining that small New England state. These articles have details, and your thoughts and comments would be appreciated, as well as your thoughts on why this would have been covered up for so long. Thanks, as always, Elijah. Well, I could already answer you why it was covered up, because it was their access, like youth centers, schools, youth detention, juvie. Those were access for these deviants to get their hands on children. Okay? And once the hammer started falling on all this and everything started blowing up, again, that's when we started seeing this influx of foreign child trafficking, because their access to children were cut off. This is a first world nation. Once the internet came about, and access to media, and access to being able to get to mass people without the help of a mainstream media source, the jig was up for these people. The gig was up. The jig was up. Got to move to something else. Throw open the borders, and you hear about all this child trafficking of children. Nobody knows who they are. Nobody knows where they came from. Nobody even knows if they gone missing. It's perfect. It's perfect for them. So that's why this was allowed to fester for so long, because you had a generation of sociopathic degenerates, pedophilic degenerates that were just going through these poor kids. And they all started getting caught, and they had to move on to something else. So let's get on to these video or these stories. But before we do that, please go to the description box of this video and click on the Rumble link of this video and watch the Rumble version, as I am monetized over there, and it'll help greatly with the channel's success. On to the actual subject matter. That is not where I wanted to be. This is supposed to be at the end. Sorry. All right. New Hampshire agency agrees to pay $10 million in youth center abuse cases, from CBS News from about a month ago. The New Hampshire Attorney General's office has agreed to a $10 million settlement in the case of a man who alleged that he was gang raped in a stairwell at the state's youth detention center in the 1990s. Michael Gilpatrick's lawsuit against the state would have been the second of more than 1,300 to go to trial, but instead both sides agreed to settle out of court, his lawyers said. The payout is 4 times the maximum amount available to those who submit claims via the state settlement fund for abuse victims, though less than half of the amount the jury awarded last May in another lawsuit, the first of its kind that went to trial. The $38 million verdict in that case remains in dispute, as the state seeks to slash it at $475,000. So the states don't even take full responsibility, because what they do in a lot of states is they cap the amount you can actually win in a lawsuit. I don't know if that means every state does it differently. Some count actual damages different than punitive damages and compensatory damages. Like in Florida, the max you can get is $1 million. It would be like $1 million. Now, you could get more than that in compensatory, and if it goes to trial, and these lawyers, they don't want to mess with a jury, so that's why they'll end up saying, even though it's a $30 million verdict, they'll pay $10 million, so just so they don't have to go back and forth and possibly have to pay the $38 million. And you'll take the settlement because they might say, oh, you only get the $475,000. So they don't want to take it. Neither side wants to take a chance. It's all part of the game, and it sucks. Gilpatrick, now 41, was 14 when he was sent to the Youth Development Center for 3 years in 1997. His lawsuit accused 10 staffers of the Manchester facility of sexual or physical abuse, included repeated rapes and being choked to the point of unconsciousness. There was nobody you could go to at YDC to talk to. You were literally stuck in your own thoughts and your own fear every single day, he said in 2001 interview. That place turned us into what we were. I can't say what I am now because I'm a better person now. But coming out of that place, I was a monster. In one instance, Gilpatrick said 2 staffers held him down in a stairwell while another raped him, and the fourth man forced him to perform a sexual act. Those allegations resulted in criminal charges against 4 former staffers who Gilpatrick called a hit squad. 2 of them have faced trials so far. Brad Asbury, 70, boomer, was sentenced to 20 to 40 years in prison after being convicted in November of being an accomplice to aggravated sexual assault. But jurors deadlocked in January on whether Stephen Murphy was guilty of rape, leading to a mistrial. Murphy, who denied assaulting Gilpatrick, faces 3 other trials related to other former residents. So it seems like a rape squad. And honestly, like, I'm kind of scratching my head because this sounds awfully familiar to this. To the movie Sliders, if you ever saw that, with Kevin Bacon, and I think Patrick Dempsey was in that. It's a good movie. It's a real good movie. And Kevin Bacon was like the main bad guy. And they had a hit squad in this juvenile facility. It was 4 of them that went around raping these kids. And, you know, the movie was them getting revenge later on. The 4 of them used to roll together, and they would go to different cottages and beat kids. Gilpatrick testified at the first trial. They would literally come over and just go door to door and beat every single one of us down the line. The settlement spares Gilpatrick from what would likely have been another emotionally difficult court proceeding. He also testified at the 2 criminal trials, at times lashing out angrily at defense lawyers. He said he did not tell anyone what happened to him at the time because the dorm leaders were involved in the assault, and he then spent decades trying to bury his memories. Who do you go to? You're in there, you're a kid, you're getting raped by the staff and the dorm leader. Like, who are you supposed to tell? And this is the type of place my mother would always threaten to have me sent to, where I would be raped. So here's the thing. This wasn't a big secret. This wasn't some big secret that this shit was going on in all these facilities. My mother used to threaten me with Boys Town, where they would come down, hold me down, and big N-words would come and stick it in my ass. That's what, every time you're going to get raped, they're going to hold you down, you're going to stick it in. You think a thermometer is bad. They knew this was going. Understand something. The boomer generation knew all this shit was going down. The cops would threaten you with it. My parents would threaten you with it, but the cops especially would threaten you with it. Teachers would threaten you with it. It was a big fucking joke. This wasn't a secret. This wasn't a big secret. This wasn't like, oh, when all this broke out, everybody's like, yeah, you've been telling us about this since we were kids. You've been telling us this would happen to us if we went to these facilities since we were kids. This is not a shock. It wasn't until they started getting busted for it that all of a sudden, oh, now it's a problem. And then you started seeing the influx of the child trafficking from foreign countries because they couldn't get away with it with us anymore. 11 former youth counselors have been arrested since the Attorney General's office began investigating the facility in 2019. Though charges against one were dropped, another was found incompetent to stand trial, and a third died waiting trial. 2 men have been convicted, and another case that ended in a hung jury is expected to be retried later this year. The Associated Press generally does not identify those who say they were victims of sexual assault unless they have come forward publicly, as Gilpatrick and others have done. The youth center, which once housed upward of 100 children but now typically serves fewer than a dozen, is named for former Governor John H. Sununu. Lawmakers have approved closing the facility, which now only houses those accused or convicted of most serious and violent crime, and replacing it with a much smaller one in a new location. And that was the thing. They would send you to these places for fucking nothing. For nothing. That judge in Pennsylvania that got caught taking cash to send kids who basically did nothing to these youth camps to get abused. And they were making money off of it. Let's see this one. Charges dropped against former YDC employee accused of sexual assault. Frank Davis found incompetent to stand trial. Criminal charges have been dropped against one of the former Youth Development Center employees who have been accused of sexually assaulting the children in their care. Documents show the court has found Frank Davis, 82, another boomer, gets away with it because his boomer brain stopped working. He's not competent to stand trial. A judge has dismissed 5 sexual assault charges against him without prejudice, which means they could potentially be brought back. But the court also found that Davis's competency to stand trial is not restorable. When prosecutors first brought charges in 2021, they said Davis was described as Kung Fu Frank because he was known to regularly wrestle with children at the YDC in a room near the basement. The dropped charges included allegations of sexual assault against several children in 1997. At the time of the bail hearing, the judge noted that, given his age, a conviction for Davis would have effectively been a life sentence. Who cares? Should have just friggin' death penalty. Wood chipper. He's 82. He's doing this in 97. So, I mean, that's almost 30 years. So he's like almost in his late 50s when he's doing it then. Or in his 50s when he's doing it then. You fucking creep. The Attorney General's office told News 9 that Criminal Justice Bureau continues to prepare the prosecutions of the other defendants accused of abuse at the former YDC. The first case to go to trial is set to go in August. Criminal charges are separate from the civil cases, which are ongoing. He can't get out of the civil case, that's for sure. Second juror in a New Hampshire Youth Center abuse trial explains verdict, says state misinterpreted. One of the jurors who awarded a New Hampshire man $38 million in a landmark lawsuit over the abuse of the state's youth detention center says the state is misinterpreting the verdict by capping the payment at $475. Jurors on Friday awarded $18 million in compensatory damages and $20 million in enhanced damages to David Meehan, who alleged the state's negligence allowed him to be repeatedly raped and beaten and held in solitary confinement as a teenager at the Youth Development Center in Manchester. But the Attorney General's office said the award would be reduced under state law that allows claimants against the state to recover a maximum of $475,000 per incident. Well, he was raped a lot of times. So I think that's what they mean by misinterpret. The jurors were not told of the cap. When asked on a verdict form how many incidents they found Meehan had proven, they wrote 1. They completed the form does not indicate whether they found a single instance of abuse or grouped all of Meehan's allegations together. But one of the jurors emailed Meehan's attorney on Sunday to explain their reasoning. We wrote on our verdict form that there was one injury being complex PTSD from the result of 100 plus injuries, sexual, physical, emotional abuse, the juror wrote. According to the court documents filed Sundays by Meehan's attorneys, we were never informed of a cap being placed per incident of abuse, and that is wrong how the question was worded to us. The state is making their own interpretation of the ruling that we made, and that it is not right for them to assume our position, the juror wrote. David should be entitled to be what we awarded him, which was $38 million. Meehan's attorneys have asked the judge in the case to hold an emergency hearing on the matter Monday and have brought a case in former state Supreme Court Justice Gary Hicks to help make their case. Attorneys for the state had not responded to the request for a hearing by Sunday evening, and Michael Garrity, spokesman for the Attorney General's office, declined to comment other than pointing to Friday's statement about the cap. New Hampshire's stupid for doing this. Just pay the money. Just pay the fucking money at this point. How are you going to only say, oh, you only get $475,000? Sorry, you were raped 100 times by our employees that we did nothing fucking about. In their motion, Meehan's attorney said that the juror's email statement and others sent by the jury foreperson confirmed that jurors misunderstood the verdict form. The attorney said that the finding of only one proven incident is conclusively against the weight of the evidence and logically inconsistent with the damages awarded. In such circumstances, the court not only has a broad discretion, but is in fact duty-bound to take corrective action, they wrote. The attorney cited past cases in which judges questioned juries and then directed them to reconsider their verdicts. The jury foreperson emailed one of Meehan's attorneys, Russ Riley, within hours of the verdict saying, I am absolutely devastated. The next morning, the foreperson sent a message to David Vizcaino saying, my guilt kept me awake for the better part of the night. I was literally sickened and brought to tears in fear of the mistake we made. I still am, the juror wrote. Meehan, 42, went to police in 2017 and sued the state 3 years later. Since then, 11 former state workers have been arrested and more than 1,100 former residents of the Youth Development Center have filed lawsuits alleging physical, sexual, emotional abuse spanning 6 decades. And you want to get off on $475,000? Like, sorry, I know you got 1,100 more cases you got to settle, but you let this fester. Sorry, not sorry. Meehan's lawsuit was the first to go to trial over the course of 4 weeks. Meehan's attorneys contended that the state encouraged a culture of abuse marked by pervasive brutality, corruption, and a code of silence. The state argued it was not liable for the conduct of rogue employees that Meehan waited too long to sue. Rogue employees, you guys, it seems like it's all your employees. It's all your employees, and you hadn't supervised them. What a weak argument. In cross-examining Meehan, attorneys for the state portrayed him as a violent child who caused trouble at the youth center and as a delusional adult who exaggerates or lies to get money. The case, wow, so exaggerated. The rape happened, but you're exaggerating it. Honestly, how do you all live with yourselves? Obviously, the jury didn't buy it if they're sickened by what you're trying to do because you're making them think they fucked up. The case highlighted an unusual dynamic in which the Attorney General's office is both defending the state against civil lawsuits and prosecuting suspected perpetrators in criminal cases. YDC abuse payouts have topped $125 million. Let's see, how long is this one? Adult survivors of New Hampshire's juvenile detention system have been paid more than $125 million in abuse settlement agreements, according to a report issued Tuesday, as new Governor Kelly Ayotte signals the money is running out. The state's YDC settlement fund has so far settled with 242 people who are reportedly being physically or sexually abused while incarcerated as children in the state's Sununu Youth Services Center, formerly known as the Youth Development Center, or YDC, in Manchester. Most of the claims are for people who were sexually abused as children by state employees. The state originally set aside $100 million to settle claims as the abuse scandal, decades in the making, finally became public. Should have dedicated more then. But that money quickly ran out and another $75 million was approved. However, there are 600 claims filed and the YDC settlement fund still pending of those 500 claims alleging sexual and other abuse. Ayotte recently told the reporters the state needs to take a closer look the way the claims are handled by the settlement fund before it agrees to pay out more settlements. Oh, too bad. Too bad, Kelly. You're going to have to come up with more money. Unfair to the taxpayers, but you got to vote these people out. You got to vote these people out because they're the ones who protected all this shit. I think the state needs to reevaluate those claims, Ayotte said during a press conference. First, we're not in a position to continue increasing the $75 million a year until I have more information on how those claims are being evaluated and how that system is working. You don't want to pay the money, Kelly? You don't want to pay it? These are abuse victims as children raped in your facility by your employees. The fund is administered by a team led by retired state Supreme Court Chief Justice John Broderick, in his recent quarterly report, Broderick told Ayotte he expects an influx of claims filed this year ahead of the June deadline. New Hampshire does not have insurance to cover the liability, and taxpayers are on the hook for all the funds. Even once the state pays out all of the approved $175 million, it's still a bargain compared to the financial calamity looming in court. There are more than 1,000 civil lawsuits filed by survivors pending. The first lawsuit, brought by survivor David Meehan, resulted in a record-setting $38 million jury award. The jury also found that the state is liable for horrific sexual abuse perpetrated by YDC staff and covered up by an indifferent bureaucracy. Why is it not a class action? Because a class action would knock this all out, I would think. That $38 million award is yet to be paid, as the state is fighting to knock it down to $475,000. That fight is heading to the state Supreme Court and will likely be sent back to the Rockingham Superior Court. 2 more civil YDC trials are scheduled for this year. When the scandal broke, then New Hampshire Attorney General Gordon MacDonald formed the YDC task force to investigate and prosecute the alleged abusers. Out of the hundreds of alleged abusers named by survivors, the task force managed to indict 11 men. The last of the indictments were handed up in 2021, and the task force has shifted away from investigating any more suspects. Yeah, because they don't want to know. If they said, do I think it was all 100? No. Is it more than the 11? Absolutely. They took probably the 11 oldest men, the most sympathetic they could find, and would have to serve the least amount of jail time, something just to throw some meat at them. Throw some meat at them, and that's what they're doing. They're doing the minimum. Society does the minimum when they have to prosecute the narcissistic boomer. Bottom line. So far, 2 of the alleged abusers, Brad Asbury and Stanley Watson, have been convicted for their roles in the abuse. A jury in Manchester is currently deliberating the case against Stephen Murphy. And that is the last one. So, again, this stuff was never a secret that it was going on. If you're Gen X, this is not a surprise. We were threatened with this shit all the time. It's not a shock. My parents would threaten me to send me to Boys Town to be raped. Yes, to be raped. Once they couldn't hide the reality of it, once it was right in your face, it's one thing to threaten and to hear stories from an adult. It's another thing to hear it from the people that come out of there and the kids, and you hear it and you see it yourself. Once they couldn't hide it anymore, they had to move on. They had to scapegoat some people, and then they had to find a new source. And that's where all this foreign child trafficking originated from and why it's happening. Because the internet cut off the boomers' source of debauchery. Bottom line, the internet cut it all off. Cut all that shit off. They couldn't get away with it anymore. They couldn't. So. Also, that movie I talked about, Sliders, that came out right around the time all this was going on. So they almost took it as, What did these guys take this as like a how-to rape these kids in this facility? Because the story is nearly identical. It's nearly identical. And it's nearly identical to the threats that were being made to me personally by my own parents. So, boomer degeneracy, man. Thank you, Elijah, for another contribution and story. I really appreciate it. Thank you to everybody watching. Please leave any opinions in the comment section below. And again, if you want your story read on the channel, you have a topic you'd like me to cover, something you'd like to expose, you'd like to set up a Skype, a phone call, have a private video made, you'd like to sponsor a video like this for someone who needs help and can't afford it, or just make a contribution to the channel in general to keep it supported, growing, and successful, because this channel survives 100% on contributions from all of you. Without you guys, all this goes away. So if you like what you see here and you want to see more videos like this, you know what to do with either the Cash App, Zelle, PayPal, and email links in the description box below. Also, please like and share this video wherever you can. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't, and be sure to click the subscription bell to be notified of all my video uploads. Also, be sure to subscribe to both my channels on Rumble. Follow me on X and Telegram as well. I'm Ollie Matthews. This has been Societal Narcissism. Take care, everyone.